to Keeping It Real podcast, where I, Mary Laura Hunt, interview experts on the dangers of social media and how to handle them in the real world. I do want to kind of preface that we are going to be talking about some not inappropriate subjects, but some age-appropriate subjects. So if you have little ears listening, maybe save it for another time, but we're going to dive right into it. I'm so excited to be here with a speaker, writer, teacher, and the director of Freedom13 Ministries right here in Ruston, Louisiana, Lindsey Crawford.
Hello.
Hello. I'm so excited you're here. I think we're going to be talking about some very interesting subjects that all of you are going to be very interested to listen to. But before we get into all of that, Lindsey, I want our listeners to get a little bit more familiar with you. So can you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Well, I like to say that I'm from Ruston, even though I'm a preacher's kid, and I've lived all over the place because of my parents moving. But ever since I was married, which was almost 22 years ago, I've been a Ruston girl. So I'm very proud of that. By profession, I'm a school teacher. I taught 6 years in private and public school, and I really thought that that's what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I love teaching. But then we started our family, and I started having little kids back to back to back, and so I really wanted to be at home to be with them until they became school age. And so now I have a senior, a sophomore, and a fifth grader. So when they started school, I just didn't feel like it was part of my calling to go back to teaching. God was stirring some other things up in my heart, obviously related to the mission of Freedom13. I didn't know what that was going to look like at the time. But there were some things that I was learning about our community that bothered me and also kind of mesmerized me as far as just wanting to know more of what that looked like and what was happening. And so that is kind of where the vision for Freedom13 started to come together for me. And so we officially started in 2015. We have ebbed and flowed with the culture. We love to discuss topics that affect us every day, but that are sometimes hard to talk about just openly, kind of like what we're doing today, even though they're in our hearts and our minds all the time. So initially we started talking to groups about God's design for sex and healthy relationships and how technology and pornography were affecting our everyday lives. And so as that kind of just grew, a jail ministry came as a result of that. A sex trafficking ministry was birthed out of that. And now we have the privilege of talking to students about social media and mental health. And
wow, that is amazing.
It's a lot.
That is such
It sounds
inspiring.
crazy.
Like, no, I love it. Like, wow, like that's amazing. I can tell just by the way you're talking to me about it that you are so passionate about it. So I read up a little bit about you before we came here, and so I saw in your bio that you expressed that you started this ministry because of like a personal life experience / heartbreak, something along those lines. So I'm just wondering if you could maybe expand on that a little bit for us, if it's not too personal. And so what was kind of the turning point where you were like, this is what I want to do with my life? But just, and what,
like from a personal perspective.
Yeah, from a personal perspective, like what in your personal life stirred this up in your heart?
Well, I'm just like everybody else. Like, we have our stories, things about us that we're not proud of or things that were painful. I'm very fortunate that I don't have a lot of tragedy in my past, which I'm thankful for. My parents are divorced. That didn't happen until I was an adult and I was a mom. And so that impacted me obviously in a tough way, like it would anybody. I had a rough relationship in college that I'm not proud of, but God taught me a ton of things in and through that. And what I learned is when my husband and I, we were on vacation in Canada one summer, and we were whitewater rafting. And our boat flipped, and it was just a crazy situation, but both of us nearly drowned in that situation. And that's like another story for another day. But I walked away from that experience realizing how quickly life can come and go. And it made me think about how I was using the time I had on this earth. And I've had all these experiences, some great, some painful, but God has allowed them to happen to me for whatever reason that only He knows about. But I know that there are other people out there who can relate to that. Like when we sit down like you and I are doing and just kind of let our guard down, just become transparent and not act like we're something that we're not, or that we're better than, like we got it together, because none of us really do.
Truth.
It's just, I just feel like a lot of the pressure it just kind of starts to break away. It just kind of falls off. Like we start connecting, and we can almost find something in common with everybody that we meet.
Yes. So wow, I love that. So you're obviously a very faithful woman, which I so admire. You talk with such grace. You obviously deal with some really hard, heavy things in your ministry.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of navigate staying so faithful and expressing your faith to other people that come through your ministry that might not believe the same things as you do?
Right. That is a great question, and it's really a complex one to answer. With every situation that God has given us, we pray over, we being my staff, my family, we pray over handling it in a way that honors the Lord. We're in a culture and a season of time where you can just about mention anything and somebody's going to be offended by it. And so the way I've just not really tried to avoid, that's a bad way of saying it, but just trying to kind of keep the ground neutral is because I'm a Christian, and I'm proud to say that I'm a Christian and that I love the Lord, that He is who I find my identity in. And I have that, I can say that about myself because of the things He's done in my life. And those are things that other people can't take from you. When God does something in your life, that's yours. That's your story. That's between you and Him, and nobody else, even though they may try to talk about you or judge you, they really don't get to, because that's your experience, not theirs. And so when we're standing in front of, like, let's say a student in public school, which that's kind of a tough crowd, and you have to be so careful. Our agenda is never to go and push our faith on anyone. We don't even mention faith unless someone asks a question, that we just can't help avoiding it. We're not there to talk about controversial issues. We're really there just to present the statistics and the facts, and this is what's happening in our culture, and what are some boundaries that we can put into place to protect ourselves. Just try to keep the ground neutral. It is challenging, though, because everybody's got an opinion about all of the topics that our ministry is about. So,
well, and I'm a really big believer in not banging people over the head with a Bible, and more showing that we know the Lord through our actions.
Absolutely.
And I can so tell that you do that every day. And I think that's a much more productive way of expressing your faith.
Amen.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that you have a sex trafficking awareness has sprung out of this ministry, and that is a really, really hot topic in our society, and it's talked about a lot. But I think a lot of people don't really ever get a solid explanation of what sex trafficking actually is. And you have to know what it is in order to understand how to avoid it and protect yourself. So can you break that down a little bit for us? Sure.
There's a lot of words and phrases that we use interchangeably. Some of them mean the same things, and sometimes they don't. We use them incorrectly as a society, and I'm guilty of that too. But you've got the sex industry, okay, which that could be anything from prostitution to stripping to anything that is related to sex, okay? Then you have sex trafficking, which is something of value that you're exchanging for sex. So that could be money, drugs, shelter. It could be a number of things. You have human trafficking, which is the general term for all of the above that I just, mentioned, basically. And then you have labor trafficking, which is similar to sex trafficking, except the exchange is not of something of value for sex, it's something of value for work. Like if you work my farm, for example, then I'll let you live on the property free. Okay, sounds like a good deal, right? But things can go wrong quickly when you have things like that. So there's a debt to be paid.
Yes. So in terms of social media, how has social media hindered or helped the business of sex trafficking?
Right.
Because in my mind, I feel like it's much more, there's much more awareness around it, but it's also, I feel like it's really easy for creeps to get in there really easily. So what's your take on that?
Well, yeah, we're in a culture of information. If you want to read about something, you just go to the Google, right? It'll just basically solve our life's mysteries if just ask the Google. And so there's a lot of good in the sense that you can read up and you can become clear on topics like that we're talking about today. But if you're talking about social media and kind of the danger or the reality that comes with that, especially on the heels of COVID and this pandemic where we were all behind doors and we were all on our screens mostly. It's created this whole new next level kind of opportunity for predators, and it has set up this really unhealthy playground of comparison. You know, what is the ideal? How do I need to look? How smart do I need to be? How much money do I need to make? I mean, it's not just pertaining to sex trafficking. I mean, it is just so many things. But definitely predators, it's increased their opportunity to reach out, and they've gotten real creative with how they do that.
So I want to dive into that a little bit. How do you recognize if you are the prey of a predator? How do you come to that realization? What do you need to look for?
Well, the first knee-jerk response that I have to that question is if it feels off, it's probably off. You know, if it just feels funny or weird or creepy or, you know, cringy, it probably is. It's like, you know, when I'll get to talk to students and I'll ask them, how many of y'all have gotten a weird DM from a complete stranger?
Oh yeah, so many.
And like junior high kids and up, almost the whole room will raise their hands, okay? And then I'll say, all right, well, leave your hand up if the message you got asked you to do something that was weird. You know, maybe sexual, maybe not, but just something that, you know, maybe they asked you for money, or maybe they asked you to send a picture of your dog, or, you know, whatever it is. If it feels weird, if it feels off, then it probably is. Someone who compliments you, a total stranger who may be looking on your social media page and all of a sudden they start commenting regularly or sending you a private message, you're so beautiful, I love the color of your hair, I love the style that you've chosen. I mean, those are things that we have a circle of people in our lives that get to say those things, right? Our family or our close friends. But when it's someone outside of that, that's kind of infringing a little bit on our boundaries.
And I mean, if I'm being completely open and honest here, the truth of the matter is, if you're that one kid in the class that doesn't get to raise their hand when the question is asked, you know, who has gotten a weird message or been asked to do something weird, if you're like, well, I haven't been asked to do something weird, your immediate response is, well, I guess I wasn't pretty enough for them to message me in the first place. And I feel like that's the whole reason why we engage with this in the first place.
That's what's so twisted about it.
Because it's so wrong, but anywhere where we're going to get that validation, like, we're going to engage with that.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
So, like, what is your advice to teenagers who are looking for that validation and who are, like, unintentionally going to fall into that trap of, wow, like, they're making me feel special, so I want to continue this unhealthy relationship?
Right. That's why Freedom13 and what we do is so important, because I don't think I've been there, and I'm sure you could relate to this. Like, we don't even realize that we are stuck in that frame of mind. We don't even realize that when somebody says, how many of y'all have gotten a sleazy DM from a total stranger, and we don't get to raise our hand, and that makes us feel insecure? Like, we don't even see that that's kind of sick a little bit.
Yes.
Like, that we're feeling left out because a creep hasn't messaged us.
Totally.
That's good, you know. But that's what I mean. We all fall into the trap of being so blinded by what this culture has sold us as far as standards. And so being able to kind of come in and help you help open your eyes to things. Also from a parent's perspective, just having open and honest conversations that you have to just keep going all the time with your teenagers. I'm sure that happens in your home. Sometimes you probably like it, sometimes you probably don't. And then just having good friends, you know. But the truth of the matter is, when we are unhealthy, when we are broken, we usually gravitate to unhealthy and broken people. And that's why when something feels weird, maybe asking somebody who may be struggling that you see, maybe you're in a good place, but this other person isn't, just being bold enough and brave enough to say, hey, are you okay? You know, how are things going? Without being too much, you know, and it's a really huge challenge for all of us.
So if there are parents listening that are like, okay, I want to be open and honest with my kid, but I don't really know where to start. Like, what specifically open and honest conversations do parents need to have with their kids, like, surrounding social media and the problems and situations that social media can present?
Well, as soon as a parent decides to let their kid have a phone in any capacity, whether it's just a text or it has everything on it. Those conversations have to start right then and there. Of course, you know, and this is kind of the wrong audience as far as you and I talking, but when I'm talking to parents, I always am like, put that off as long as you can. You and I have talked about this. Everybody's different as far as when they can have a phone. You know, it depends on maturity level and those kind of things, and can they handle the responsibility, all of that. But once you've been through all of that and the decision has been made as a parent, those constant conversations and not being afraid to hold your kid accountable, which means going on their phone. I hate having to get on my kids' phones because I'm terrified of what I might find. But that's my job. You know, I'm not being a good mom if I don't check to see if the conversations are healthy. If who is this person you FaceTimed? Where were you when you FaceTimed? You know? But the thing about social media is it's really hard to hold each other accountable for that because stuff comes and goes so quickly. It's easy to hide things. You know, you can't put those filters that you can maybe on your phone on an actual social media app, so it becomes a challenge.
For sure, and that's kind of the purpose of this podcast, because I find that a lot of parents tend to shy away from social media because they don't understand it, and like that's their kid's realm. They're not going to enter that. But I mean, if it's your kid's realm, it's your realm too. And most of the time, a social media persona and life is just as impactful, if not more, than an in-person life.
Oh my goodness, it's a double life for a lot of us that are having to keep up with the standards of what's on social media and our phone use and then real life. But I try to tell parents, okay, when your kid was small, did you just send him outside to play in the street and be like, good luck to you? You didn't do that.
No.
That's insane,
No.
okay? But that's what it's like with our phones. We hand them to our kid and we're like, best of luck to you. And it's very, very dangerous, the things that are out there. There has to be some training.
Why do we do that? Like why does our society not put social media on the same page as like any other danger? Like, why is that? I don't.
Probably there's a whole list of things, but I think an easy answer is we compare our experience with our phone use to that our kid will have the same experience that we do. I try not to get on social media. It annoys me when I get on social media. I try to put time limits, and we assume our kids are going to do that. But we forget, you know, I hope to not offend anybody, but we kind of forget how easy it is to be dumb as a kid.
Yes.
And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but we just don't have that development, you know, in our brain to make good decisions. And I just think it's easy to forget that, or we think my kid would never do that. My kid would never send that kind of picture. Well, hopefully not, but you know, the statistics show that they are, you know, so.
Well, and I'm going to have a counselor on here in a later episode to kind of break down the thought process that a teenager has, but that's a great point, because we're dumb. A little bit. We don't have the life experience not to be.
And also, and I read, you wrote this somewhere, I was reading your stuff this morning, but like there's no manual.
No.
Like no generation of parents, grandparents, or kids has gone before us. Like y'all are it. Your generation, y'all are like the guinea pigs in this whole thing. And so we're having to live and learn, and y'all are paying too some really big prices for this.
Oh. Yes. Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
So if a parent is worried about their kids, something feels off to them in their social media world, and they go to check their phone, what are like 3 major red flags? Like if they see it, they need to be concerned.
I know I can speak from personal experience. When I've checked my kids' phones, and like when the way they're communicating with their friends, like the texting or the messaging, or even maybe some of the snaps going back and forth, if that doesn't sound like my kid, the person that I know is my kid, that's going to be a red flag for me as a parent, because that's going to tell me you are one way with your friends than you are with me. So when you're reading your kids whatever, and you're like, my kid wrote this, my kid talks like this, my kid thinks this is funny. We've all done it. And I'm sure all of your friends have done something like that because of the peer pressure component, but just that's a huge red flag for me. Obviously, pictures or videos, I think that kind of goes without saying. If you see something that concerns you that they've received or sent, sometimes y'all receive stuff from people you didn't ask for that, you know, and so those are some big red flags. As parents, we need to talk our kids through what to do in those situations. That's I guess it's whatever is concerning in your home, and that's, from home to home and space to space, because my standards for my kids are sometimes too high because I'm kind of a strict mom. I'm not real proud of that in some ways. In some ways I am, some ways I'm not. So it just depends.
Well, I mean, I'm a total believer, like, you need to have a good foundation of morals as a kid to, understand what should be expected of you in the real world.
And I'm thinking too, as we're hashing this out, like when we gave our kids phones, we gave them a contract. And I know that sounds super cheesy.
I had that with my car too.
All the kids are going, oh, I roll. But we had a contract where all the expectations were written out, and the consequences of what would happen if they did A, B, and C. Okay, and it was a really long contract because I'm kind of a wordy, detailed person. So we went through that with them. They signed it, and they've not always kept to their agreement, and we've had to go back. And I think that helps too. When you start seeing, as a parent, when you start seeing some of those rules being broken that y'all talked about, and he or she signed off on. That's a good place to start.
And it's not like you're just going to make up a rule to make up a rule. Like, most of the time, if you have that contract, there will be natural consequences for whatever you're asking them not to do. And I feel like that's the same thing in faith. Like, there's nothing that God is going to ask us not to do that won't have natural consequences. Like, there's a reason. And so most of the time, the kids that are rolling their eyes because their parents made a contract, like, the kids who didn't have that contract learn the hard way.
They do.
And that's much harder than having a contract.
Yes, it is. And I think where you're at, like, growing up in your stage of life, because I have a senior, and he's turned a corner as far as understanding these things better. Kids just really don't, I think in general, they have a hard time receiving the consequences. They're fine up front, like, oh, okay, if I break this rule, this is what's going to happen to me. I know, okay, where do I sign my name? Just give me my phone, kind of thing, and not realizing that, okay, are you going to have the same kind of attitude when you break the rule or when something happens? And we don't. I mean, if my husband hides my phone from me to play a joke on me, it's not funny to me.
No.
I get upset because I want to know where my phone is because I'm so dependent on it. That's kind of sad that I feel that way, but it's true for all of us. Anyway.
Okay, so let's start on the elephant in the room. Let's talk about it.
We haven't talked about
it. No, we've laid out some elephants, but we're going to talk about the big one.
Okay.
So let's talk about sex. Okay. Let's talk about the sex industry, because I am so interested, because I feel like everything is very much like me, attention. Like, I need to draw attention to myself, and I feel like everything nowadays is very sexualized. Like, everything.
It is.
Why?
Well, my faithful answer is Satan. Satan is alive and the devil is real. Okay, but that's just me. But also our culture is just completely fascinated with the topic of sex. I don't even think we realize it sometimes, but I don't see how kids could, because I would have missed it as a kid, because our parents thought it was sex crazy when we were kids. But
so this isn't a new thing.
It's not. Has it gotten worse in some ways? It has. Technology has amped up the game for sure, but it's really just the same song, different verse, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
But our music is very sexual. Our celebrities, it's like you are as valuable as you are sensual. That's like the value system that we've placed on culture. Like, the more sensual and the more sexual you are, the more valuable you are to our culture and to the world, okay, quote unquote. Go into any store around here and look at the clothes for little girls. They keep getting shorter and thinner and skimpier. I don't even know if we realize, it's like this slippery slope. But I think for kids, kind of goes back to the thing with social media. When it feels off, it is off. And you don't have to say yes to things. And I know like when it comes to sex, like, you don't have to, but I'm talking about, I think there are kids coming up in society today that girls especially, that don't even know that they have an option to say no, because the expectation is always, you got to look like this, you got to talk like this, you got to act like this, when you really don't. You can say no to these things, and you can have a high standard whether you're a person of faith or not. You can have a high standard for yourself. we just have to remind ourselves of that option a lot.
So how has social media influenced our relationships with these topics, with sex, with boyfriend-girlfriend relationships, with family relationships? Like, how has social media influenced those relationships? Because I feel like sometimes on social media they're a little unhealthy.
For sure. It's because of the access to it. I mean, that's how I feel. When I was a kid and I was your age, if we wanted to look at pornography, or if we wanted to just look at something that was almost like pornography, we had to work a lot for that. Like, you had to go to the store and buy the magazine, or you had to go down to the XXX store in town, which you were never going to do because somebody might see you, especially with a small town. You would just, it took a lot of work. But now it's one click away. It's, and even if you have filters or boundaries in place on your phone that your parents have put there, it doesn't mean that your friend's going to have those. I mean, it's so easily just to throw something in your face without you even asking to see it. And then all of a sudden, you've seen it, your eyes have seen it, your brain responds to what you've just seen, then your body responds to what your brain is telling you, because that's how God wired us. God made us to be sexual. He made us to be in relationship with other people. And there's like this counterfeit idea out there of what is sexy and what is healthy, and it's all a bunch of crap, but we pay for it, we buy it, and we're an easy sell.
So what is healthy? Because I feel like we can all establish what is unhealthy. Like, we know when something's unhealthy. We feel it. You feel it.
Yeah.
What is healthy? Because I feel like that is buried underneath the big pile of our society being like, okay, this is unhealthy.
Yeah. Personally, if it causes you to be or feel unhealthy in any way, then it's not healthy. If you're in a relationship and it's not helping you be a better person or closer to the Lord, if it's not helping you to help, if this person is not helping you meet your goals or accepts your dreams, and I'm talking about even the relationships with our phone. I'm not talking about necessarily a romantic relationship, although this definitely applies. If you can't become a healthier person or a more spiritual person, or you can't achieve your goals, or you can't discuss and get affirmation for your dreams and who you are, then it is not healthy. And that's just pretty basic for me. And I think what we don't see is the average kid will spend 30 plus hours on his or her phone a week. Okay, a full-time job is 40 hours. I mean, sometimes 30 hours for some people is a full-time job, but it's pretty close to a full-time job. If I spent that much time getting to know my husband or going on a date with him, if I spent that much purposeful time with him every week, I mean, I think we have a healthy marriage, but just imagine how much better our relationship would be, or just marriage in general across the board would be. But we don't. We're spending that time in a relationship with the machine. And that lacks a lot of fulfillment and creates a lot of unhealthy habits and thoughts.
So if we are trying to form a healthy relationship with our phone, our friends, our boyfriends, our family, like if we're putting in the effort to try and do that, make that relationship healthy, I feel like the hard part of that is the people surrounding us are not doing the same.
Right.
How do you deal with that? If you're trying to do better, it's really hard to do that when the people around you are also not trying to do better.
Exactly.
So how do you handle that?
Well, that's a really hard thing to handle. And sometimes we have to change our scene. Like, we have to change our group, we have to change our environment, and we also just have to be able to tell whoever's in our life, look, I'm not gonna be on my phone for so many hours, or I'm not going to look at that because it's not healthy for me, or I'm not going to watch that show because it makes me feel insecure. To be able to say those things and the people in our lives be like, okay, I respect that. If they don't respect that or can't respect that or can't support you, they're probably not your people, or they shouldn't be.
Yeah, great point. We talked a lot about how social media is unhealthy and the things that we do need to avoid, but I kind of want to unpack how this is going to benefit us, because this isn't going anywhere.
Exactly.
And so how let's get some positivity going through here about it.
Thank you. That is such a great idea, because I always hate when I have to walk away from a group of kids or a group of parents and it's like, Oh my gosh, that was the most depressing information I've ever heard. Here's the thing, when we know better, we do better. Okay, so there's something to be said about stopping and talking about the hard stuff.
And this is what we're doing.
And that's exactly what we're doing. But, okay, now that we know this, what can we do about it? That's my thing, all right? I think your generation has turned a corner as far as being the most creative generation that our society has seen. The fact that, and this is what one of my most favorite things about y'all, we can't sugarcoat anything with you guys.
That is a good point.
Okay, like our parents, the baby boomers, right, and even Gen X, and maybe some millennials, we're an easy sell, especially our baby boomers. You know, if the people in our life told us that's what we needed, we didn't question it. We just did it.
Wow.
Because it's like my grandmother, this is how she always did, whatever. Y'all are different because you've had so much access to information. It's forced you guys to question everything you've seen and everything you read, because you can go scroll and read what an influencer says about the campaign, the presidential election, and you have to choose, all right, am I going to adopt her set of views, this influencer, or am I going to make my own? And so I love that it's made y'all stretch in the sense that, okay, I don't want to just be repeating, y'all's generation doesn't want to just be repeating what you just read on social media. You want to actually form your own thoughts. So creativity, we are having more entrepreneurs, activists in this culture coming out of y'all's generation than we ever have, because it's depressing what's happening around in our world. So I love that you guys, y'all want to change the world. Y'all want to change what we're having to deal with. You're realizing you're going to be a mom one day, and okay, how is this going to impact my kid? And so you're making some really great changes. You're starting businesses. You're not easily deceived. So when you have to make a tough decision, you're going to make a wise one, because you've thought on it. You've, as my husband says, you've kicked some tires, okay? I love that about you guys. And I think it's gonna make y'all better parents and just better human beings. You know, if you're a person of faith, y'all, you know it's gonna get worse before it gets better in this world. You know, that's just the nature of sin. But I love that this generation of kids, there's something going on in their hearts, like from a spiritual perspective, they're wanting to be better and do better. And they're wanting to change the environment that we're in, you know.
Wow. Well, I don't know about any other teenagers listening, but that just like pumped me up. I'm like, oh yeah.
It should. We need to have support groups where we all meet together, and I get to meet with you girls and be like, don't forget, you are creative, you are smart, you are what, because we do in this culture, it's so easy to forget that for all of us.
Well, I love that. That just made me feel like revived. I don't know about anybody else. And yeah, I do like that point. Before we are able to change, we have to embrace our situation and our difficulties. So, and that's what we're doing here. Thank you so much for coming and talking about some of the stuff that might be a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm so glad that we touched on it, because so many people are wanting those answers, and hopefully I gave you some that you were looking for. So thank you so much, Lindsey.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so Lindsey, I'm wondering, and I want to give this information to our listeners, where can people find more of you and Freedom13?
Well, speaking of social media and how unhealthy it is, they can find us on the social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram, but also we have a website, Freedom13ministries.com, if you want to volunteer, if you want to support, if you just want to know what we're doing in this part of the country, you can go check it out.
And if you're listening to this podcast and feel like you might need some help or guidance in Lindsey's area, please make sure to check her out. Give her a call. She's super fun to talk to, like we've just seen here.
Thanks.